Tenant unions in Los Angeles want a massive expansion of public housing and to totally abolish private landlords. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting topic for you today, and it has to do with tenant unions. So I've brought up tenant unions before because, you know what, I see an expansion of them in places that traditionally would be considered landlord friendly. And in particular, I'm talking about Kansas City right now. But you know what? It amazes me that tenants, they feel that they have a right to your property. They have a right to make the decisions, that they think that you should make without even taking into consideration the business needs, your expenses, etc. Now, this is the exact same thing that regular unions do. I'm a big opponent of traditional unions on top of that because these unions drive companies out of business. And that's exactly what these tenant unions want to do with landlords. They want to drive us out of business. Now, they have no clue what our expenses are. They have no clue how much profit we're making, yet they think they can dictate how much the rents are going to be, whether we raise the rents or not, etc. That's idiotic. It's absolutely idiotic, and I do not agree with it. And I think that, we should nip this thing in the bud. Okay, we should make it so that these tenant unions have absolutely no power. Now in Los Angeles, they're coming right out and they're saying what they really want, okay? They want the total abolishment of private landlords. They want a socialist housing system. That is what this really has to do with. It has to do with socialism. And that is part of the reason why I think that tenant unions are absolutely idiotic. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. So in the places where you invest, are tenant unions, are they starting to become an issue for landlords there? Now, obviously, they're going to come out at first and they're going to say, oh, we're just working to make sure that our properties are kept up in the right condition. But here's the problem I have. It never ends there. Okay, it never ends at, oh, well, we're just attacking this one bad landlord over here. No, next thing you know, they're organizing in Omaha, Nebraska. Yeah, that's right, because I read recently that now tenant unions are forming here in Omaha, Nebraska, where I do own rentals, okay? I own rentals right here in the town where these tenant unions are forming. And they are protesting against these building owners who are people who I have met before. Great. This is awful. This is absolutely awful. And you know what? We're not considered a state where tenants have, a great amount of rights over our property rights. So if those things can happen here, imagine what it's like in a place like Los Angeles. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today, okay? So anyway, let me get into this article. It's interesting. I wanted to go into the mindset these people have and why we need to fight it, okay? This article is coming from LA Public Press, and it says, abolish rent in LA? Tenant union founders imagine a different world. And that's what they want to do. They want to abolish rent. They think that public housing is the solution. And you know what? If you're coming from the perspective of somebody who is very low income, who cannot afford your rent, and you live in a super expensive place like Los Angeles, you're going to feel hopeless. I admit, right? I would feel pretty hopeless in a place like LA, but you know what? I wouldn't live there. Okay, that's just it. I picked up, back 15 years ago, almost 15 years ago, I picked up and I left Kansas City and I moved more than 1,000 miles away to Arizona for better opportunities, okay? Away from all my family, all my friends, and I haven't been back. I never moved back to Kansas City after that. Now, I live in Omaha now, so I've done more than one cross-country move. I've lived in multiple cities across the U.S., but you got to do what you got to do, okay? If there are no economic opportunities where you live and you're just facing poverty, then you got to get up off your butt and make the decision, hey, maybe this isn't the best place for me to live. Anyway, let me get into this story. When Tracy Rosenthal and Leonardo, two of the founders of the Los Angeles Tenants Union, organized tenants in rent strikes such as the Mariachis in Boyle Heights, they saw tenants could refuse to pay rent, win better conditions, and still keep their homes. To tenants' surprise, their keys still open the locks, and their home, though they have not paid for it, persists. They write in Abolish Rent, How Tenants Can End the Housing Crisis. Rosenthal and Vilches said they saw, after years of activism, that fighting to reform the private housing system seemed only to produce laws that were not enforceable and low-income housing developments that were not affordable. As gentrification engulfed Los Angeles in the 2010s, they concluded rent had to be abolished outright, and renters could build enough power to make it happen. Landlords, they argue, are effectively holding apartments for ransom from individuals who should control where they live. They want a massive expansion of public housing and tenant-controlled housing to replace private rentals. Very short-sighted and idiotic, okay? All they have to do is look at the history of public housing here in the U.S. to see that the government, okay, the government is absolutely awful at running housing. If they don't realize this, they are idiots because, simply put, the government, they can build a beautiful looking project. Okay, they can. The housing projects, when they first came out, were great, okay? Everything was functional, everything was good. The problem comes in maintenance. Maintenance of something that you're going to hold for a long period of time. That is where the issue is, okay? Now, it never occurred to the government when they were building something, hey, we're gonna have to maintain this for the next 20, 30, 40, 100 years, okay? So we're gonna have to keep this building in good shape, and our original expenses, right, they're going to increase as time passes. So the government is awful at maintaining stuff, and that is part of the reason why the the public apartments that they built, the public housing projects that they built, they became dilapidated and they fell into disrepair. The other issue that the government has is, right, they are running a social program, a social welfare program for these people, right? Not a for-profit. And so when people start doing things where they deserve to be kicked out, right, they have nothing they can do. They have absolutely nothing they can do. So let's say you have tenants in there who are causing problems by committing crimes, not maintaining the property up to the level they want it to be, not paying the little small minuscule portion of rent that they agreed to pay. Well, the government is going to sit there and be like, well, we can't evict them because then they will end up out on the street and be homeless, right? So there's no tough love for these tenants out there. And so what do? They allow those tenants to stay in the building, and those tenants drag the place down. So they, trash the property, and then other tenants, seeing that, well, this tenant isn't maintaining theirs, so I'm not going to maintain mine. Or they bring crime into the property and they make the place horrible for everyone living there, and there's no recourse, there's no action that the government is taking against those people because they're giving these people charity. Well, in a private property, the landlord just kicks those people out. In the best case scenario, if you're talking about a good landlord, okay, they just kick those people out and say, hey, you are causing problems, you've got to go. So you know what, that is something that they don't think about when it comes to public housing. And then let's talk about the reality behind public housing, okay? They imagine a world where, hey, I am living in an apartment that is affordable in the exact area where I want to live, and it's perfect in every way. And, that's not the reality. Instead, the government decides how much housing you get, okay? So let's say that you are a single person, right, who has no kids, okay? The government decides, well, you only need 400 square foot studio apartment, and we're going to give it to you for free or for super low cost, but it's going to be way over here, 20 miles away from where you want to live. Okay, you're not living near the beach, you're not living in downtown or near the cool areas where you want to live. You're living where the government says you can live because that is the housing the government is providing you. Okay? Now, that would suck. When you're dealing with private housing, you choose where you want to live, and you choose the sacrifices you want to make in terms of amenities, in terms of size, in terms of everything, okay? And how much you're willing to pay. If the area has too much crime, you don't have to live there. But if the area has too much crime and you're in public housing and that's the only housing the government is willing to give you, you have to live there. Otherwise, you get nothing. See, these socialists, they live in this utopia world where, oh, everything would be perfect if I had my housing paid for. No, it wouldn't be, okay? The government could just basically pick you up, put you in a cot in a cardboard box, okay, and in the middle of the ghetto where you're getting attacked every day. They could, because their only concern is making sure that everyone is housed. Their concern is not, to make sure that you have the lifestyle that you want or are living in the area that you want. If you want that, you're going to have to pay. So yeah, very short-sighted these people are, and I mean, it's not surprising. I mean, what do you think? Communists always, they see things through, rose-colored glasses, like everything would be perfect when they don't even realize the shortcomings and the things they're asking for. They could see that rent abolition may not happen in their lifetimes, but they argue that tenants in LA are already taking steps forward by organizing their buildings and by going on rent strike. According to Rosenthal and Vilches, the task of the tenant union is to grow the power of our movement enough to make rent strikes general and finally permanent. Yeah, and that's the thing. They want to basically cripple the private landlords, and it's going to have the wrong effect. That's the problem it's going to have, okay? What happens in places where landlords don't have enough rights, where property developers can't build what they want? We already know what happens. You can just look around LA and see. There's a lack of development. There's a lack of affordable housing. There's a lack of units available, okay? All of the problems that they are trying to fight against, they create more of. And they don't realize this. So, you know what? When we look into their mindset, it's a very naive, childish, and uneducated mindset. And that's what we are fighting against. This is what we're fighting against here in Omaha, where they're forming these tenant unions as well. In Kansas City, right here in the Midwest, they look and they see the stuff that's going on in LA or up in New York or in these very strong, left-leaning, anti-landlord places, right? And they say, hey, we could do that here. That's why we got to fight it. That's why I bring these articles up. Even though they don't directly affect me, they will eventually be a problem.